Again, we are in John 8 this morning. We were picking up in verse 13. We're just cruising through John now. We're moving. We got through one verse last week, but we're going to get through some more this morning. In verse 12, Jesus made an incredible declaration. We looked at that last week. We spent the entire sermon last week looking at its significance. The religious leaders will spend the remainder of chapter 8 looking to tear Jesus down, to dispute his testimony, they don't just want to say that his testimony is invalid, they want to prove it false, and they're just going to do everything they can to attempt to do that. We know that in chapter 5, Jesus healed the man by the pool of Bethesda, and he did it on the Sabbath, and that brought up all kind of things. Here was the religious leader's heart after that in verse 18 of chapter 5. This was why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. And that's been the problem for the religious leaders with Jesus from the beginning. All the way there. And then Jesus presented his case in chapter 5, calling the four witnesses we covered. John the Baptist had been a testimony of him. His works and miracles testified. God the Father testified, and then the last testimony that Jesus called on were the Scriptures. And they scream of him everywhere that we turn. They speak of Jesus and who he is and who he was to be when he came and what he was to do. And this group has missed all of that. And then in chapter 6, verse 35, Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger. Whoever believes in me shall never thirst. And Jesus had said that after feeding 5,000 people on the boys' bag lunch, declaring that he himself was the manna that came down from heaven. And we know that at the end of that, the crowd did what? They walked away in disbelief. And then he had the whole time with his 12, and they were still with him, but he pointed out at that time even he knew one of them was a devil that was there to betray him, and we know that that's Judas he was speaking of. Then we got to chapter 7, and had the whole festival of booths. The religious leaders continue to dispute Jesus. Verses 37 and 38, on the last day of the feast, the great day, Jesus stood up and cried out, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. So again, Jesus made a declaration. The people were divided, but the religious leaders sent temple guards to arrest him. We knew that was the result of chapter 7. They sent temple guards to come arrest Jesus. They showed up having not arrested him. And the next thing we got to was verses 1 to 11, where they brought the woman caught in adultery, and so they tried to trap Jesus, to discredit him that way. Figure if he stones her, then people will know he's not really the compassionate person he speaks of, and if he doesn't, then we'll ridicule him for not believing in the law. And then we brought in the whole Roman thing, because if you stone somebody, that was only something they could do. So they had him caught over a barrel a bunch of different ways we had looked at it. Today's passage, they look to discredit the testimony of Jesus. So if we remember what verse 12 said, this was his testimony. Chapter 8, verse 12, again Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. We spent all of last week looking at all of the things that referenced, the pillar of fire that led the people, and all the protection and all the leading. So it was God's presence, protection, and guidance, as in the cloud and pillar of fire that led Israel for 40 years in the desert. Again, this group doesn't want to just dispute Jesus' claim, because he started with I am, right? We said, what does I am mean? We said it was ego eimi, which is a Greek form of what God told Moses. I am is literally what it says. When Moses said, who should I say sends me? God said, tell them I am that I am sent you. In other words, God has always been, always will be. There's not a beginning and an end. I simply am. I am. And the religious people should have known all of that. And I think they did know all that. They didn't want to accept Jesus for who he was. They wanted a different Messiah. They wanted something different. Jesus says, whoever follows me will not walk in darkness. So if we want to break that down and just unpack that a minute, therefore, whoever doesn't follow Jesus will what? Continue to walk in darkness. and be dead in their sin. I mean, if he's saying whoever follows me will not, so you're coming out of, so if you don't follow him, then you are stuck in that. And whoever follows will have the light of life, which means whoever does not will remain what? In the darkness, in their sin, in their slavery and death to sin. So you're either one or the other, right? There's not some kind of in-between stage. You're either in the darkness or you're in the light. Because when light comes, it does what to the darkness? It dispels all of it. It takes it all away. So you can't be in the light and still be in the darkness. Just why we'll see so many passages that say if you're in Christ, then you've got to be done with this stuff. Because the light has come to take all of that away. Well, in verses 13 to 18, the challenge of Jesus' testimony, and they challenged Jesus' testimony right away in verse 13. So here's the beginning of our passage today. So the Pharisees said to him, "You are bearing witness about yourself. Your testimony is not true." You are bearing testimony. So we go back, and we're going to dig through some of the Old Testament stuff that they kind of grabbed and ran with a little farther than was ever intended. But there's no question that Jesus claimed to be light and life, that he had every right and qualification to have men follow him. He claimed to be God. There's no disputing that Jesus was making a claim that he's God. And that's amazing today. I don't know how many of you know Paul Washer. He's a pastor I enjoyed. He says things sometimes strong and little. He's not worried about your feelings when he speaks God's word. He'll step on your toes plenty easily. Well, he was early in ministry, speaking to a crowd of youth, and all of a sudden the youth pastor of the church where the thing was got up and ran out, and he heard the man say heresy. And he continued to preach, and the next day he was called in by the senior pastor. He was an associate pastor. He said, "Well, someone's levied a heavy charge against you of teaching heresy, so we're going to hear it." So they brought the youth pastor in, and the senior pastor said, "Well, so it's a pretty serious charge you're bringing against a brother. What is it?" And the youth pastor said, well, Brother Paul here said that Jesus is God." The senior pastor was like, "That's because he is." So I don't know what they did with that youth pastor, but the youth pastor had a growing moment. I don't know what he believed of Jesus prior to that, but it's like, no, there was no heresy here. You're way out of line here. You don't seem to know who Christ is. That was this crowd. They didn't know who they had in their presence. The religious leaders had all the education and all the knowledge and all the scriptures, and yet they did not get the significance of all that Jesus claimed to be. And they rejected him for it. They rejected Jesus' claim to be the light of life for being God. But how were they to eliminate this testimony? The arrest didn't work, the trap didn't work, so now perhaps a technicality will help. We'll bring in court-type talk, and maybe through a technicality we can kind of poke holes at some of his testimony. They at least thought they'd give it a try. So here in Jewish law, there's a maxim to the effect, no one can be convicted on the testimony of but one witness. We can appreciate that, right? Because anybody who just doesn't like you could drag you in our court system somewhere. It can't just be their word against no other evidence and nobody else. So there always had to be a second witness. Always 2 or 3 witnesses were required. And this principle is expressed in Numbers 35:30. But no person shall be put to death on the testimony of one witness. In Deuteronomy 17:6, on the evidence of 2 witnesses or of 3 witnesses, the one who is to die shall be put to death. A person shall not be put to death on the evidence of 1 or 2 witnesses. In Deuteronomy 19:15, a single witness shall not suffice against a person for any crime or any wrong in connection with any offense that he has committed. Only on the evidence of 2 witnesses or of 3 witnesses shall a charge be established. Now, I do realize what they're grabbing is a court and a charge against somebody, right? It's not a testimony that someone declares of themselves. The first 2 had to do with you can't be killed without that many witnesses. Thankfully, we don't want to just put people to death. But now it gets to even a charge, but Jesus hasn't said something where there's a charge against him. He simply declared a testimony of himself. And so what happened, it had been interpreted in the broadest way possible by the rabbinical authorities so that it came to be applied eventually to all testimony. So what started, we can understand why it stood there in a capital case where you're going to put someone to death. We better have this right. And then in any criminal case, we better have more than one witness. But now they've broadened it out where anybody's testimony at all has to hold up to this scrutiny. We said that in chapter 5, that Jesus went through his testimony. He had 4 different witnesses. Here, though, he stops and he's going to come at it. So nothing was to be believed unless more than one person could attest to it. So, of course, no one could testify concerning himself, was their argument. The rulers now applied this to Jesus' claim. Since Jesus did not have additional witness, Jesus' claim was invalid and thus was to be discounted. But they didn't just want to invalidate it, they wanted it to be declared false altogether. Just because it doesn't get validated doesn't necessarily make it false, right? But they want to push this thing to its fullest. They want to make fun of and tear Jesus down in front of all those that were around. Is this not the attempt of many today? They discount Scripture and say this isn't true, not based on any evidence that they have, but they just say, prove it. It's kind of hard to where are my witnesses to prove it? Well, in the body of Christ, we have one another. We can start to tell our stories, can we not? And start to tell how God has redeemed us and changed us and the things that have gone on. That's why our testimonies are important, that we do get up and share. Is our testimony the gospel? Not necessarily. It may have the gospel in it, but our testimony does reveal the things that Christ has done in us. And then we those men that have set out to tear this thing apart, that are serious about trying to tear it apart, often become believers because it holds up. The scientist who goes tear it into it goes, there's more scientific evidence of this than there is of the rest of our stuff. It just continues to hold up. But in their day, they took the role of the agnostic, and it's not that they don't believe, they'll say, you don't have enough evidence to prove it to me. Again, God will move in the heart and change them at some point if he's going to change them. Which is why we're going to get the cross is going to be so important, because the love and the grace that we are displayed through the cross absolutely draws us and changes things. Well, Jesus is going to go on and make 3 points in verses 14 to 18. Number 1, Jesus declares he has superior knowledge. This, not 2 men, but God. And it's not just 2 men who are testifying. It's God and God the Son who are testifying. He's going to claim, now I do have another one that testifies on my behalf, and it's the Father. And if you knew that I was the Son, you'd realize this isn't just 2 men that are testifying together. You can't have 2 higher powers that are testifying together. Verse 14, Jesus answered, even if I do bear witness about myself, my testimony is true. For I know where I came from and where I am going. Obviously, he came from where? From heaven. He didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped. He was willing to leave that on our behalf, to come here to earth, to take on the form of a man, and even at the one point by the end we're going to see to go to a cross. But I know where I came from, where I'm going, but you don't know where I come from or where I'm going. Verse 15, you judge according to the flesh, I judge no one. And that was this time here he judged no one, right? Is he saying he'll never judge anyone? It's not what he's saying. He will come back and judge one day, but that's not why he came the first time. Verse 16, yet even if I do judge, my judgment is true, for it is not I alone who judge, but I and the Father who sent me. In your law it is written that the testimony of 2 people is true. I am the one who bears witness about myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness about me. Pretty strong opening point, right? Verse 17, Jesus is quoted as changing the original phrase when it said, but I and the Father who sent me, in your law it is written that the testimony of 2 people is true. Originally it said 2 witnesses. It's believed that Jesus changed that phrase from 2 witnesses to 2 people, thereby stressing the great gulf that exists between merely human and therefore limited testimony versus his own. He and the Father are not 2 people. They're higher than that. So rather than saying 2 witnesses, he changed it to 2 people to signify This isn't just two people. This is God the Father and God the Son coming to testify against you and to declare what I say is true. So do you recognize this distinction? Have you seen that if Jesus is the one who claims to be, then he's able to bear testimony about God and to certain things about man that we could learn not in any other way. When Jesus comes along and says things about us, no other man could have come along and said those things. Only God could have come and said those things. And if he's not God, then we have no sure knowledge of God. But if he is God, his statements and claims must be trusted. So we're back to yes, Jesus claimed to be God, and if he's not, we're in trouble. I'm wasting my time up here. I need to get a new profession. I need to go do something else because I'm just spinning a yard. I mean, it's just not true. Do you know it's true this morning? Do you know his testimony is true? It's not just some guy in history that took up some time. Well, the second point he makes, Jesus defended his right to give testimony about God and man on the basis that his testimony is impartial. Jesus is not limited as other men. He's without sin. He's the sinless one. Everything you and I bring into play, does it not come into play with a certain amount of bias? A certain amount of our flesh and our own sinfulness? I think even subconsciously sometimes in what we say is, we care what other people think about us, so it comes into play on how we say it. So one of the things that Paul Washer seems to have gotten over early in ministry, but he doesn't care what you think about him. He's just going to tell you the truth. And sometimes John MacArthur has said the same thing. He said, this book is an equal opportunity offender. It will offend all of you. So I don't lose any sleep over it. So save your emails and save your notes if you've been offended, because it was supposed to do that. I'm not saying if you got a problem you can't bring it to me, but if it's because God's word and the truth offended you, then suck it up, Buttercup. Because it offends me every day when I read it. And so I need to change, and I need to repent, and I need to come before him. And I'm glad for his grace to change me. So sin always enters into man's testimony and our biases and judgment. There was a story of two lawyers. And they spoke of a not-so-honest judge in Virginia, and there was a dispute between two railroad companies. So the lawyer of the first railroad company sent him a $10,000 check. And the lawyer of the second railroad company sent him a $15,000 check. So he told his secretary, write a $5,000 check and return it to the second lawyer, and let them both know we're going to judge this case on its merits. He was going to keep $10,000 from each of them all the same. Yeah, that's how we tend to work things, right? Didn't return all their money and say, here we'll make it even. I took 10 from each of you, wink and a nod, and let's move forward. Thank you for your contribution. But that's in our nature. We're always looking to get something. We're always looking for an edge somehow. We're always looking for some way to spin this in our favor. Jesus is not held by any of that. With no sin, He's not worried about the approval of men. He's not worried about anything else. He's here to only do what the Father asked him to do. And he's going to do that. The third thing Jesus pointed out, and he's done this earlier, that his testimony did not stand on its own, but in the full support of the Father. So there were two witnesses. What then can we say of Christ's testimony? When we put it all together, we have the testimony of Jesus himself, characterized by superior knowledge and impartiality, corroborated by the witness of the Father. So we have two superior witnesses, and the witnesses agree. So who can discredit that testimony? No one can. No one has, although many have tried. And that's not going to stop these guys from trying, because verses 19 to 27, they're going to bring up three questions. And in their three questions, they're basically trying to poke fun at, to discredit, to just tear Jesus down in any way that they can. Problem is they're doing so from a fleshly world standpoint that just doesn't hold up to it. But they're going to try. So the relationship between Jesus and the religious leaders, to say bluntly, is deteriorating quickly. Chapter 5, they were already ready to kill him. We said there was 6 months from, there's going to be 6 months moving forward from the Feast of Booths to the Passover. So when we jump back to the bread was probably the Passover, so there's 6 months. And it said after this, So maybe there's another 6 months stuck to chapter 5. So there's a year that's passed since they wanted him dead the first time. And now in all that time they've tried to arrest him, trap him, and now here we are again. Needless to say, they're not real happy. They were thrilled when he was in Galilee doing all his ministry for a year that he wasn't in their back door. But now he's closer. And now they're having to deal with him and the crowds and the way the crowds are listening. So the group, the religious leaders at this point, look to make fun of him personally. So let's read verses 19 to 27. They said to him, therefore, the religious leaders saying to Jesus, "Where is your Father?" Jesus answered, "You know neither me nor my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also." These words he spoke in the treasury as he taught in the temple, but no one arrested him because his hour had not yet come. And if I just stop there, that's the third time we've seen in John so far that his hour had not yet come. Mom asked him to help out with the wine. What did he say? "It's not my time yet, Mom. Why are you asking me this?" Then what did he do? Turn water into wine. Then his family in chapter 7 wanted him to come to the Feast of Booths. "Hey, come on." He said, "My hour has not yet come. You can go anytime, but my hour." So now the third time we have it here, his hour had not yet come. His hour would come though, right? And at that point he would do what? He would lay his life down on our back. It's coming. It's 6 months away when we're here. So he said to them again, "I am going away, and you will seek me, and you will die in your sin. Where I am going, you cannot come." So the Jews said, "Will he kill himself, since he says, 'Where I am going, you cannot come'?" He said to them, "You are from below, I am from above. You are of this world, I am not of this world. I told you that you would die in your sins, for unless you believe that I am he, you will die in your sins." So they said to him, "Who are you?" And Jesus said to them, "Just what I've been telling you from the beginning. I have much to say about you and much to judge, but he who sent me is true. And I declared to the world what I have heard from him." They did not understand that he'd been speaking to them about the Father. Well, here's their attack. Comes in three questions, three insulting questions. The first was, "Where's your Father?" Again, they're not thinking God at all. They may have known that Joseph wasn't his dad. The whole thing may have just been an issue to poke fun that you're an illegitimate child from the start. You don't even know who your dad is. You claim this father, and from what we understand, you don't even know your father from a biological standpoint. Because they're going to say in verse 41, we're not illegitimate children. And I think they just were coming at Jesus to just poke fun at this moment. And they're not getting at all who he's speaking of when he says the Father. So let's just try to find a way. When you didn't know what else to do with somebody, right, you just start trying to attack things that you know you can attack. So you go to the lowest denominator. So here's one we can pick on, and so they throw that out there. The second was, will he kill himself? Jewish belief that anyone who killed himself went to hell. Jesus had said, "Where I go, you cannot come." They believe they're going to heaven, therefore they're just thinking he's going to go kill himself. Yeah, he's going to hell. That's not where we're going. So where are you going? Will he kill himself is the second question. Will he kill himself? No. He will lay his life down on our behalf. They're going to be the ones behind it. The third and final question, who are you, in verse 25, had the effect of calling him a nobody. Well, who are you? Heard that before somewhere, right? It's been thrown out in an argument with somebody. So who do you think you are? A little dangerous if you happen to be talking to Jesus, though. So, well, I happen to know who I am. I'm the one who gives you life and breath. My Father holds all things together. Always has, always will. But those were their questions. Those were their attacks. It was a rejection of all the things that Jesus had said about himself previously. So what was Jesus' response to such questions? What was his reaction to the scorn they expressed? And it's interesting that Jesus answered by the strongest series of statements about the fate of the unregenerate person that we've seen so far in John's Gospel. Put that in layman's terms, he's just laying out, for those who don't turn to me and believe that I'm the light, it's going to be bad. And I'm going to tell you just how bad. You are dead in your sin and lost, and you're going to remain that way. And you one day will be judged by the Father. Not by the Father, even you're going to be judged by me one day. So here's the things that he said. Jesus said, "You don't know me or my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also." Verse 19. Then he added, "You are from below. I am from above. You are of this world. I am not of this world." That was verse 23. In other words, these men, despite all their position, all their power, and all their learning, they did not know God. And because of that, they asked these scornful questions. Jesus just says, I get why you would be the way you are. Because you're not from where I'm from. And you are sinful and lost. And you are dead in it. So, yeah, I'm not shocked by those questions, but it's because you're dead in your sin. And the second, Jesus taught the day of God's grace would not last forever. He taught it in two ways. First, by reference to his death and departure. He said, after which they would seek and not find him. And secondly, by reference to the fact that they would die also in verse 20. So where I'm going, you can't follow me. You won't find me. And then you're going to die in your sins. The day of God's grace does have an expiration date. There is a day he's coming back, at which point there's no more time. Or you're going to pass away, and he's going to take you. And there's nobody that dies that then has a chance of salvation either. Once we're gone, either in one of two ways, either in Christ or in our sin. There aren't any other options. So we need to make sure we don't delay in trusting Jesus. And it's interesting, because I'll talk to a lot of people, they spend a lot of time preparing for retirement. And we've talked about this once before. If I took a rope and made it as long as possible, and on the very end just put a little red part, that would represent your life in the timeline of all of creation. And most people are worried about that little part right over here at the end of that red part, but have not given any thought of eternity. So I've had folks say, you don't have this much retirement put away, you don't have this, you don't have that. I mean, no, I don't. I keep meaning to get to that, but following God and sharing Jesus with people, because it doesn't make a lot of sense that I'm going to worry all about this when I have the whole rest of this rope. So what have you done about the rest of the rope? If all of your concern is I need to make sure I can live comfortably for a few years here and have done nothing about eternity, let's talk about who's nuts. You want to live comfortable and happy here and spend eternity separated from God in your sin? Or do you want to make choices that make sure that maybe you can have both? I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying it's stupid to have retirement by it. That's not what I'm saying. But people can be so focused, and then they get to that point, they don't even know what to do with themselves. Now I'm here. Here wasn't what I thought it would be. I guarantee you that here in eternity with Jesus will be far better than anything you thought of it. There's nobody going to get there and regret choices they made that were based on pursuing Christ and making him known. So because of that expiration date, we also need to make sure we're sharing him with others, right? Is there anybody that we love that we want to see not be with him? But we don't want it to end that way. It will for some, we can't control that, but gosh, let it be, because we exhausted everything we could to love them and share that grace with them and to communicate who he is. Well, the third, Jesus responds that if they did not believe, they would die in their sins. Verses 21 and 24, he made that clear. The Bible lists two ways we can die. We can die in the Lord. Revelation 14:13 says, "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on." Not a bad way to go, right? Right, when I die, I want to die in the Lord. Or you may die in your sins. To die in your sins is to die guilty as an object of God's holy, just wrath forever. There's no middle ground. Either die in the Lord or I die in my sins. Often said you're not kind of pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. Right? There's no middle ground in that. You're one of the. We used to talk to athletes: are you in or not in? Are you on the boat or are you not on the boat? There's no middle ground. You're either with us or you're not with us. And I'm sure the military had the same. And I think the early church probably had some of the same feeling because of the persecution they faced. We're either here together in the Lord, or if you're not, then get with us or get off, right? I always like the burning of the ships Cortez story, that landed by the Aztec Indians, and as the men got on their little boats headed back, he burned all the ships. There was no plan B to return. Well, you find out the Aztec Indians thought these people must be gods. They created fear in them because of the confidence they must have had. The men had no idea what was happening. Like, what the heck? guess there's nowhere to go but forward, right? Well, hopefully when we understand who Christ is, there is no other way. There's no desire to look back. This passage says, "He who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God." My farmers could understand that more than anybody else. You don't plow a straight row looking backwards. Unless you're in the new GPS tractors and they do everything for you. So technology's ruined that too, but you know what I meant. Fourth and finally, Jesus said those men who refused to believe in him and continued unbelief would die in their sins and go to hell, not heaven. Jesus was just straightforward. Again, people say, well, Jesus talked more about hell than he did about heaven. He did. It's a very real place. Now, do I need to describe it? Just void of anything that God is. How would we characterize God? He's holy, he's just, he's loving, he's forgiving, he's merciful, he's righteous. Take all that away, what do you have? Not a place I want to be. Not a place I want to spend the rest of my time again and again and again. Jesus said, "You will die in your sin. Where I go, you cannot come." Where was Jesus going? He was going back to heaven. They would be cut off forever. You can evaluate or assess your relationship to Jesus by the way in which you would answer the question posed by the Pharisees. So the first question they said, "Where's your Father?" Can you say, "Your Father is God Almighty and you are his son or daughter this morning"? Are you sure of that? Will he kill himself? Can you say, in one sense, yes, for he gave himself for me on a cross. He died to take my sin. And the third question was, who are you? Can you say, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God, you are my Savior"? Well, we can have a good understanding of where we are just by answering their nonsensical, insulting questions. Because Jesus answered each of them, did he not? Our final few verses of this passage, verses 28 to 30. So Jesus said to them, "When you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing on my own authority, but speak just as the Father taught me. And he who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do the things that are pleasing to him." And as he was saying these things, many believed in him. In John's Gospel, there's 3 places that speak of Jesus being lifted up. And we've talked here before. It goes back to Moses. I often say copper. It's a bronze snake put up on this pole. And when they were bit, they were to look upon it so they'd be healed. And I talked about it last week. And I made sure I could see that thing. I'm not going to be far from that thing. I'm going to know my eyes, because the last thing I want to do is die a death of venom in my blood that's going to kill me the most painful way possible in an hour, when all I got to do is look upon the one lifted up. Well, John 3:14 and 15 we've covered. It said, "And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him may have eternal life." It spoke of the necessity of Jesus' crucifixion. Today, in John 8:28 to 29, it says, "So Jesus said to them, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing on my own authority, but speak just as the Father taught me. And he who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do the things that are pleasing to him." And then thirdly, in John 12:32, we will get to it. It says, "And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself." He said this to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So we'll look at those 3 passages just for a moment in closing. The John 3 passage stresses the necessity in Jesus' death, where it says the Son of Man must be lifted up. Why is that so? Why was it necessary for Jesus to die? Nothing else, no one else could accomplish God's purpose or satisfy God's holy, just wrath, but one who came from him. It was only one that was from God that could make an atonement for our sin, while providing us a righteousness from God. The only righteousness that would allow us to come before God was a righteousness from God. It would have been perfect, would have been holy in itself. So Jesus had to die in order to atone for our sin and our mess, to provide us a righteousness that we could have never earned, bought, and achieved on our own. Both of those get imputed to us. He imputes our sin on himself and imputes his righteousness to us. And in every other religious system, there's only one God who has scars. And it's our God, and it's Jesus, who holds, today, his body holds the scars that he went through on the cross on our behalf. When he rose again, even in his glorified body, those scars remain. Remember, Thomas said, I won't believe till I can put my finger in it. Jesus said, here. He was undone. He didn't need to put his finger in. He saw it, and he was undone. There's no greater love when we see his hands and his feet. There's nothing like that. The John 8 passage emphasized the fact that leaders of the people would only learn certain truths of Jesus after they had killed him. There were certain things they just weren't going to get till after the fact. The cross is the only basis for true knowledge and spiritual things. When you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am who I claim to be. And they weren't going to get it till that happened. And the resurrection just dropped the mic on the whole thing. That empty tomb just kind of was got your attention now. Yes, I told you what was going to have to happen. And I told you what I would do after. I have the authority to lay my life down, and I have the authority to take it back up again. No one takes it from me. You didn't arrest me and drag me in there. I walked with you because I was ready. My time and hour had come. And I was ready to do what I came to do. And after 3 days, I was also ready to do what I'd come to do, and that was to get up and walk out of it, because death had no hold on me. John 12 lastly speaks of the drawing power of the uplifted Christ. It comes with a great attraction. What attracted you to this message? Was it not just this incredible love of knowing that Christ would take what you deserved and lay that life down in that way? The cross is an incredibly powerful drawing tool. The cross is the only basis that we have for we said true knowledge before, but in this case it speaks of the drawing power of the uplifted Christ. It comes with great attraction. He is our Savior. He removes all our guilt and shame. Jesus alone provides atonement to save the lost. In every other religion, you got to do all this kind of work to try to earn it. You never know if you really have the approval of that one. And every other religion, this is a works. I got to do this in hopes that I somehow got good enough. And in this one, while we were yet sinners, Christ did what? He died for us. This cross thing happened while we were his enemies. We hear our mocking voice. We know we're prone to want. We know we're the... Nothing gives a guilty conscience abiding peace with the atoning blood of Jesus. Christ lifted up on the cross reveals his wonderful love. We find that in 1 John 3:16 and Romans 5:8 and on and on. You must come to the cross if you would know God. So may the love of Christ conquer your heart today. If it has not yet done so, look now to Jesus. See him lifted up on the cross for you, dying in your place, wounded for your transgressions and your sin, that by his stripes you might be healed. And come to him. The world has never before seen, nor ever will see again, a Savior like Jesus. He is all that we have. So as much as this group wants to dispute him, and they're going to continue, we'll look at the rest of chapter 8 next time. I think we'll get through the rest of it next time. So they're going to keep coming and keep trying to no avail. And Jesus is just biding his time till his hour has come. But God in his sovereignty had these religious leaders in that spot at that time. He's going to use them to our benefit. But do we know him for sure today? Do we have confidence in all that he's done on our behalf? And I pray that we would just, the cross would not leave our thoughts today. That we would just continue to be drawn. We can get our kids back out from there. You can hit that button on there.